Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead on porch time today. It is extremely cold. What I wanted to talk about today is I want to continue talking about the next Great Depression. And why should it concern me? Because, and I got those requests, those comments. Private messages and stuff, I don't know why it should concern me because I'm okay. I've got food stocked up. I have this, I have that. Well, let's go back, and this is not a history lesson. People scoff at me because of history and all kind of different things. Guys, look, I'm not here to teach a history lesson. This is just looking back and learning from the past. Okay? President Roosevelt, we're going to go back to him because he seemed to be the one that got the most attention during that time. He set up what was called a Grain Reserve Act during that time. Now, this was a good thing for our country. It kind of helped, I guess if you use it in modern day terms, it kind of helped prop up the price of wheat by storing up wheat. I guess this is where it all began, from what I was able to figure out. Like I said, it wasn't a bad thing because what it done was it made the country more stable during uncertain times. Now, when we talk about the Great Depression, we're not talking about just the 1920s because actually a lot of it wasn't really that bad in the 1920s. Now, granted, a lot of people lost a lot of money, but it wasn't until the Great World Wars, World War I and World War II, that things actually got really bad. And things had to be rationed out and stuff like that. So the Great Depression actually went on beyond, say, 1944. And guys, the reason this should concern us is because we're not in the same position that we were then. During that time, most people had some sort of survival skills. Most everybody knew where their food came from. The world we live in today, not many people know where their food comes from. I doubt during the Great Depression you had very many people who called themselves vegetarians. I really doubt that. There wasn't all the gluten issues that people like me suffer from because so many chemicals has been dumped on our food in the past that it's destroyed our guts. And there were some issues, but not like we face today. Now, it's kind of strange that I should be sitting here talking about this, because the things that I talk about should be common sense things that we learned in school. But it seems like that there's been a huge disconnect on the past. It's almost like we don't want to remember the past. Well, guys, when you forget the past, all it does is enables you to repeat it. So, in the 1970s, there was this revamping of FDR's program because, see, we had kind of gotten away from it a little bit because things was okay. In the 60s, everything seemed to be doing okay in the early 70s. But they decided to revamp FDR's grain reserve program, which, once again, was not a bad thing. And what they decided to do was they urged farmers to begin to store their grain in government warehouses and government grain facilities. And in returns, because they had grain stored, the government could then offer them low interest loans and their grain would stand good for it. And that was a way to help the farmers. It was a way to help our country get its grain reserve where it needed to be, which, like I said, was not a bad thing. Even though there may have been some underlying agendas involved in it, it really wasn't a bad thing. And I know y'all probably hear this noise in the background. It sounds like water, and it is water. The whole roof was covered with ice earlier this morning, and I guess just the fact that it's getting daylight a little bit, even though it's still below freezing, the roof is actually warming up a little bit because the wind's blowing and water's pouring off the house. But, getting back to where we were at, in the 1990s, I believe it was, around 1996, I think it was, there was an act put into existence called the Freedom to Farm Act in 1996. And what that act did was it abolished the grain reserve. Now, that was not a good thing. But right after that, what happened was this became part of another act, because see, our country was always in the mode of going from one act to another act. The grain reserve became part of a thing called the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust. This was a system set up, it was like a charity system set up and ran by the Agricultural Department. The Department of Agriculture, should I say. And guys, all of this was the beginning of the end for us, so to speak, because at that point, we've abolished our Grain Reserve Act, and then our storage system was beginning to dwindle down. And then because we decided we wanted to be charity to the whole world, we started taking our grain reserves and taking it to different parts of the world and giving it to people that we felt was less fortunate than we were, because we were such a blessed nation. We figured we didn't need to take care of our own. We didn't need to store up. Well, there could be nothing further from the truth than that. In 2008, I believe it was, our grain reserve was completely depleted. In other words, it was all gone. We didn't have any more. The USDA stepped in, and what little grain we had left, they converted it into dollars. Because, guys, let's just face it. Money seems to rule everything. And we've taken our eyes off of sustainability here in this country, and we sold out for the almighty dollar, our food system. And because of that, now we don't have any backup grain reserve in this country anymore. Now, all we have to show is numbers on a piece of ledger, piece of paper, whatever you want to call it. It's just numbers on a ledger. It absolutely means nothing. It can't fill your stomach. It can't feed a nation. There's all these things that it can't do now. At this point, people, we are now completely incapable of feeding our own people in this nation if something should happen. That's where we are. And that's why in this portion of the next Great Depression, I asked the question, why should I be concerned? The reason you should be concerned is the simple fact that there's no grain reserve anymore. Guys, there's no food stored up to feed a nation. Even Joseph in the Bible spared Egypt and surrounding countries from starvation by storing up grain for 7 years, because he said there will be 7 years of plenty, there will be 7 years of famine. And for the 7 years of famine that God showed him, then he stored up for 7 years to meet that 7 years. Now, guys, storing up is not wrong. It does not show a lack of faith. Because if it showed a lack of faith, God would not have put it in the Bible and give the story of Joseph storing up grain for 7 years to keep people alive. This thing of it not being faith is straight out of pit of hell. God expects us to store up. He expects us to provide food and to set it back for ourselves. This thing is sitting back saying, oh, I'm not worried about this. God's going to take care of me. You know what? You'll starve to death. Because you've been a fool. And I can take the scriptures and show that. Because God expects his people to do all they can do. Now, when you have done all that you can do, and you have no other means, yes, at that point, God is obligated to step in and prove himself and to meet your needs. But up until that point, he ain't obligated to do nothing for you. It's not until you've exercised every bit of your own energy will he even step in. Now, the question is, if this was to happen in our country, some sort of a life-changing event, then how would the government get food? Well, it's beginning to sleep pretty good out here again. Let's talk about that. How would they get food to feed all the massive people? Well, whether y'all know it or not, under the previous administration, there was a bill passed which actually goes back to, I think it's one of the bills that was passed in the Korean War time. Actually, may even go back further than that. That gives the government authority to take food from people to feed things like troops and to feed, just to feed other people. If you have a stash or a hoard of food, then it gives them the right to actually take it from you if they need it. That bill is in existence. It's a Senate bill. I did know the number, but I don't remember what number it is. You can Google it and find it. It's there. But now the question is this something new? No. Because during the Civil War time, the government done it then. They went from farm to farm to homestead, and they took what they needed to feed the troops. If they needed your cows to feed those soldiers, they took them. If they needed your pigs, they took them. If they needed your chickens, they took them. If they needed your grain, they took it. To feed the troops. And guys, the government will, if they've done it before, will do it again. Now, what does this mean for us as homesteaders and preppers? Well, I'm going to tell you like it is. If you're a prepper, you'll make it till your supply runs out. After that, it's possible you could starve. If you're a homesteader and you have supplies stocked up, you'll make it till your supplies run out. The only difference between a prepper and a homesteader is this. A homesteader that has gained some skills and some knowledge and has some way of producing himself food because he has a place to do it. He lives on some land. It may not have to be much land, but he owns some land and has learned how to raise some food. It is possible that he would continue on. Now, who are the ones that will actually survive regardless? Well, guys, that's the ones who are homesteaders, who've learned their skills, who've learned their wild edibles, who've set up permaculture, who have designed their homesteads in a way in which when they walk out the door, for 365 days a year, they can walk out their door and find something to eat and be sustainable. That, my friends, is the ones that will make it indefinitely. Which group do you want to fall in? Every one of those groups are not bad. Every one of them is one that should be heeded. If you're a prepper, I give you a thumbs up and I tell you, store, store, store. But should somebody take your stuff from you, then what? If you're a homesteader who has stored, but has not learned any skills, and they come take your stuff from you, then what? My friend, be a homesteader that has learned his skills, that has learned his wild edibles, that has set up some form of permaculture around you so that you can go outside 365 days a year and find something to put in your stomach or your kid's stomach. That is what I encourage you to do. Because, my friends, this ball is rolling, and it's rolling fast. There's things that's in play right now. Not only in this country, because see, the problem is, we keep our eyes on this country. This country is not what determines its own direction. Guys, we need to keep our eyes on the Middle East because that's the place. A little country over there called Israel. Israel is what will determine the time clock and how fast things proceed. And it sure looks like things are starting to heat up a little bit over there. Am I saying that it's fixing to happen? No. Am I saying that it could be close? Yes. So my friends, this is another discussion on the next Great Depression. And why should it concern me? Well, it should concern you because this country has no food. You see, California used to produce about 40% of America's vegetables and nuts and stuff like that. Since the drought, California's suffering bad. They're not producing 40% anymore. They're being burned up out there. Drought has set in. The place is becoming a desert. So we can't depend on that anymore. It's like the hand of God has been removed from the bread bowl of the nation. That's why it should concern you. We have no food, my friends. It's been said that right now America only produces about 3% of its own food. It's all being imported in. That's not good. Today has been food for thought. But, my friends, today Porch Time has been set up to say, hey, this is why it should concern me. Because we have no food left in this country unless we raise it ourselves. Food for thought. Thank you from Deep South Homestead.